This video today is sort of an explanation for some things that we all are seeing around us on television and the news. And I have to say that things won't get better, I can tell you. These are obvious items that are in the current magazines about how long Obama has before he leaves office, and this video is to say basically that this could be presumptuous on the part of a lot of people because nobody knows for sure if he will actually leave or not. And I am going to explain to you now of why I don't believe he will leave office. The reason for this video is so that people who may or may not realize this will be aware of the fact that the police are targeting blacks as far as these shootings, specific hits on them for obvious reasons that make no sense. For example, they seem to be shooting them for no reason at all now. One guy was on the ground, he was being handcuffed, and he just jumped up and ran away, and then the police had the opportunity from that just simply to shoot him. And the question now in a lot of people's minds is, why would the police do that when they knew already the guy was unarmed? And I'm basically in this video going to explain to you why they're doing this. And even the obvious fact that they're doing it because of what probably Obama himself has told the law enforcement agencies around the United States, if not to the black community. The more that the police do these acts, the more racial tension builds to the point where they will start rioting, they'll start vandalizing homes and businesses. And of course, you know this happened very specifically in 1968 when Martin Luther King was assassinated in Tennessee. And the reason why the police could not control all of those random riots that were happening all over the United States, I would think, is because the government felt we need to let the tensions die down, so let's just let them do whatever they want to. They did go after certain big riots, you know, hosing people down, all the rest of it. But when you relate that to almost 50 years later in 2015, Obama wants a race war. He wants a race war for one reason. If he can find a valid excuse to initiate martial law against the country, first of all, he won't have to leave office. He can stay in office indefinitely for as long as he wants. And who would want to leave as President of the United States if you could actually do that forever? He had the same love that so many of the people in Venezuela had for Valdez or Valencias or whatever the guy's name was. He was a dictator of his country. He definitely had viewpoints of socialism and communism, and he made himself basically a king. He could not be forced to abdicate. He couldn't be forced to do anything until finally he died. And that is what Obama definitely wants for himself, because as a socialist, his viewpoint is first you control the country and then you control the world through the United Nations. And if you can initiate a martial law, then you abolish, first of all, any electoral process to elect a new president. You abolish freedom of any kind, and that includes the Bill of Rights, by the way. People don't even talk about the Bill of Rights anymore, but it was a part of the U.S. Constitution. But now, I would think because of the initiation of Homeland Security, there's no reason for them to have the Bill of Rights. They can just say it's a justified null and void of your rights because of the terror threat that's against the entire world on that basis. Now, nobody's going to ever say to you or to say to anybody that the United States is still a free country, that it's still upholding the U.S. Constitution. I say this about the U.S. Constitution one time. At one time, it was a valued piece of paper. All it is now is just a wasteless piece of dry dust inside a glass case. Why do I say that? Because if you're not going to honor what's on it, then you should just burn it and get rid of it. And Congress and everything they've done, we've elected now 2 different times in that 7.5 years that Obama has been president. We've elected 2 houses of Congress, and on both instances they have done zero. They've done nothing, and you know that. All the United States government has done since Obama took office was to accept anything and everything he has said that he wanted to do in this country, and he has done nothing else since. He has used executive order more than any president in history, and then he says, well, there's several other presidents that have done that. Well, number one, they've never, if they have done it, they've never been so obvious as you, Mr. President, Mr. Obama. And number two, you can use any excuse you want to stay in office except one. If the American people say, we don't want you anymore, and then you say, well, that's your opinion, that's not mine, as your dictator, as your king, then everything and anything we say or try to do is just null and void. It's just an absolute waste of our time, because you're saying you have the option to say what's going to happen to our country. And you've done that since 2008. And one thing that I heard last year, which really surprised me, and I've got to say it in this video, is they interviewed Diane Sawyer, but Barbara Walters was interviewed about what does she think about Obama winning the re-election. And she said this: we thought when we first elected him in 2008 that he was a messiah. We figured he was going to bring together all the races of this country, black, Hispanic, white, Indian, all of these different nationalities. He was going to bring them together. He was going to make a unified nation. And in 7 years' time, it has gone 360 degrees beyond even that. Now we are more divided as a nation than we've ever been in human history. And for people to think that Hillary Clinton would be a better choice than actually Obama himself, who they elected in the first place, and I'm talking women, that should tell all of you that we cannot get back what we've now lost as a country. And that's number one, your liberty, your freedom, anything. Because when you get a socialist, when you get a communist in power, he won't leave office ever again. And that's more definitive today than it was before he became president in 2008. 2007, we still had George W. Bush. Okay, he wasn't perfect, we found that out, but he was still so much more smarter of a man, because if he was doing all these executive orders like Obama has said since, he didn't make it obvious to people. He didn't say it to people. He didn't say, oh, by the way, I'm going to have to pass this executive order because we've had an attack on the United States. He didn't say that. He didn't have to say that, because he knew what he was doing is what the American people wanted, so he didn't have to. Obama's done things under the carpet, behind the scenes, and said afterwards, oh, by the way, I just did this, and that's why. And it's like people just accept that. And people are gullible. I accept that too. People don't care. People have no concern for anything that happens in the government because they figure, I don't have any say-so about it. Wrong. You represent the people of the United States, and the people of the United States had the right from the beginning of our Constitution in 1776 to say, if you as a citizen are not happy with what's going on in this country, you have the right to change it, to alter it. Now, in today's mentality, and this is even on the books of the state of Georgia's government, it's called the Seditive and Seductive Act. What it means is, if you try to overthrow the government of Georgia, if you try to change anything of its actual state constitution or the federal constitution, you're automatically considered a traitor. And thereafter, you can be executed for that because of the fact that you don't agree with what the government's doing. Now, I'm not saying one person by themselves going up to the White House has been happening, and they jump over the fence and try to go in. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if the country can see as a whole that things aren't working right and you still don't do anything about it, and you say, there's nothing I can do because I'm just one out of millions of people, then you give up. And that's what's wrong with our society. People don't want to take the initiative to stop what they obviously see is happening, what's obviously wrong in this country. And America, as a nation, cannot consider itself free if we give up that freedom. That's another thing about our military. The military in this country today isn't really fighting for anything that is for the national security of this country, because if we go after people who are terrorists, but only because we want to get their natural resources like oil, coal, whatever, it isn't serving the United States as a nation to say, we're stopping this terrorism. In some instances, it has been terrorism. Bill Clinton had the chance before 9/11 to take out Osama bin Laden. He didn't. You know what his reasons for? He said, well, there were children and there were civilians there with Osama bin Laden at this camp, and we didn't want to take a chance of taking those out. Then, after 9/11, 3,000 people died. And you think, if you have to take out a handful of civilians to stop a massacre of 3,000, would you have done it? Yes, definitely. And then on 9/11 again, there was another issue. The government of the United States was held in contempt for the fact they did not try to stop those airplanes when they found out that they were actually on suicide missions. They said basically to the American people after it happened, within a few hours in fact, the FBI was asked, hey, how come you guys didn't know this was going on? You know what the FBI said? We can't protect everybody. And that's sort of like saying all that money you guys pay us every day of our lives to do all this work, it doesn't mean anything. We're just getting a big fat paycheck, but it don't matter because we can justify that because it's your money we're using. And therefore, we don't have to be held accountable for that. We can do anything we want to with your money. Because once you pay your taxes, that's what happens. They take your money and that's the end of it. So what? You know, we've got it. We can play with it. We can do whatever we want to with it. And that shouldn't happen. There is a thing called the General Accounting Office, the GAO. Now, they're responsible for justifying what the government spends and what it doesn't spend. I would think in the past 7 years, they have probably been retired as an organization within the state government or within the federal government, because Obama has done things that were so unethical and so totally out of it. Brain research. He allocated $5 billion or more for brain research. Nobody's ever asked what happened with that money. Nobody has asked, what was that for, Mr. President? You know what it's for? Mind control. That's what it's for. That way they can isolate what you think, what you do. Boom. They know exactly everything there is to know about you. And then he can just use that anytime he wants to control masses and masses of people. They're doing it right now through the National Security Administration. In completion of this video today, and I've said quite a bit, I know, in 15 minutes time, but I just am so sick of hearing this stuff on the news and thinking, why don't people see it right in front of their faces of what the government's doing with not only your money, but also with this constant increase of racial tension in the world. And that's what it's all about. Because Obama has to find a way as a dictator to control masses of people. And the only way you can do that is initiating martial law. That stops anything and everything in this country. The military takes over, boom. you're in his control. Thank you.